This is another philosopher. Peter Jackson's adaptation of Lord of the Rings is beloved by a good chunk of the Lord of the Rings community, and I would also argue has been responsible for its increase in numbers and popularity within the last 30 years. However, with that praise also came some criticisms, changes that were made that many longtime book fans were not happy about. And the one I want to talk about here is regarding changes it made to everyone's favorite dwarf, Gimli. In the book, Gimli is depicted as a serious and in many ways very knightly character almost, but also gruff and maintains a high sense of pride in his people, honor, and at times almost a hair-trigger temper, such as when he and Éomer almost go at it because of remarks he makes about Galadriel. While he does maintain a friendly rivalry with Legolas over their kill count, he mostly always has a serious demeanor about him and is always taken seriously, whether you like him or don't like him. So, therefore, from a certain point of view, pardon the pun, it's understandable why people familiar with this depiction would take up arms against Peter Jackson's interpretation of the Dwarf Lord as comic relief. To them, Gimli seems to be more of the brunt of jokes rather than a respected and equal member of the Fellowship. From the running "don't grab the beard" gag to his trepidation of entering the Caves of the Dead when Legolas just fearlessly walks in after Aragorn. Criticisms that even extend beyond the Lord of the Rings book fans when actor Peter Dinklage also spoke up against the depiction of dwarves as a whole because of how Gimli was portrayed in the films. And I get that, and I respect it as well. There are characters in other franchises that I'm well versed in, with whom some interpretations I definitely was not happy with. So I'm not casting any shade on those people, because I am one of those people, depending on the character and the universe. However, I feel that Gimli in the films does not actually get enough credit and respect where he deserves it, and I'll explain why. First, being that there's the well-treaded comment about the difficulties faced when changing media formats for a story. Things that work in books, like say how Tolkien can describe hills for 3 or 4 pages before getting anywhere, don't necessarily work in cinema format where people have a limited time to make a point and move the story along. And that's not to mention keeping people's attentions, which is never guaranteed in the first place. I feel that of the 3 hunters, Aragorn and Legolas had the stoic, serious aspect pretty much covered. And to have Gimli repeat this would probably come off as making them and their story arc somewhat one-dimensional and pretty much no nuance whatsoever. It would just basically bore people, basically. More importantly, given how dark the arc goes from the end of the Fellowship onwards, it was probably felt that some levity was needed to balance out the limited emotion stoicism of the 3 characters from the novels. Nothing too heavy like you would see in a MCU film, but just enough to provide a spark of light in an already desperate and dark situation. Gimli occupies that role, and while you can't argue that some dwarf stereotypes may be at play, the dwarf definitely helped making the darkness of the story digestible for newbies and casuals. So it wasn't just overwhelmingly depressing overall. Just look at the Battle of Helm's Deep and how serious that conflict was meant out to be, besieged by thousands of Uruk-hai. Elves that came to help are now dead, and the civvies are about to die in the caverns of the mountain because the human defenders are either mostly too young or too old, and are getting overwhelmed on top of all of that. Could Legolas or Aragorn also work the role of comic relief? Yes, and I would argue that Legolas did in the Hobbit trilogy, to be honest. But I also think that some people would still be just as upset about any of the 3 hunters being comic relief at all, not just Gimli. Secondly, regarding the portrayal of dwarves overall, at the very least, I don't think any disrespect was intended to the dwarf community, and in fact, the people who made Lord of the Rings did hire a number of dwarf actors as doubles for the Fellowship. And if the behind-the-scenes documentaries from the DVDs and Blu-rays are anything to go by, they were treated with equal respect by everyone involved. There was no demeaning, insulting, or brunt-of-jokes behavior, that I noticed at least. Third is that while I can see and understand the argument of examples of Gimli being the punching bag of the Fellowship, I strongly disagree with this as well. Gimli is shown to be just as serious as the others on more than one occasion, and he is also depicted as being one of the first ones to be concerned about the Hobbit's welfare as well before the others. At the Council of Rivendell, Gimli is the first one to just straight up try and destroy the ring rather than be entranced by it like all the others. His conflict with Legolas and overcoming that prejudice is one of the central arcs of the trilogy and provides much of the needed hope and light that I spoke about earlier. And I would argue that of the Fellowship, Gimli is the most loyal. He's the first one into battle, but whenever Aragorn is in trouble, Gimli never hesitates to jump to his aid. Literally, even if standing alone. And, by the way, that scene I just showed is also my favorite scene in the entire Two Towers movie. Gimli's pride in his people is up front and center multiple times. My favorite being when he and Éomer were about to go at it, when Gimli communicates quite clearly that he was not about to be talked down to by anybody during the Two Towers movie. A nod to the scene in the books, by the way. Gimli also provides some wisdom to the Fellowship after Aragorn has his outburst at Legolas. It's Gimli who counsels the older and immortal elf to leave him be and just let the ranger have some time to himself to process everything that's happening. And verbally says one of the best lines in Return of the King when he says he is proud to fight and die alongside an elf during the Battle of the Black Gate. There's a reason why he is one of Aragorn's crown bearers at his coronation, at his literal right-hand side, mind you. That doesn't come off to me as just a mere punching bag. Gimli may come across as being gruff when it comes to women, but he always shows respect while at the same time hinting to larger bits of lore that only book readers are aware of. Showing Éowyn respect, with the exception of the stew incident, which, if you know the history of the dwarves and the Eotheod, know that that was a pretty big deal. And Galadriel, well, hell, what can we say about that? The dwarf goes from hating elves and calling her a witch to overnight falling in love with her, and more than that, having the balls that only dwarves have to ask her for the gift of 3 golden strands of hair from her head, while seemingly also acknowledging his humbleness to her, an elf, and an elf lord of all things, at the same time. Again, if you're in the know about that story, that's a big fucking deal. Lastly, though, is that Gimli isn't the only one providing comic relief in the Fellowship, with Legolas and his famous, or infamous if you will, Legolas moments also contributing to lightening up the mood at certain points. So, all that to say that, well, I won't say that Gimli or any other character portrayals was perfect and spot on in the movies, the dwarf definitely more than holds his own, I think. I do wish they would have had him speak more about his culture or his father Gloin, given that he was a part of the original group that had originally found the One Ring in the first place, and had liberated Erebor as well. But with what was given, I was more than satisfied, and Gimli is, to this day, my second favorite character of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But having said that, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below, but this is the Miller Philosopher, and you guys have a good day.